to the session Rural Environmental Struggles. It's one of the parallel sessions in the environmental track of the World Social Forum. I'm very happy to host that. My name is Ellie. I'm active in Friends of the Earth in Sweden. And I have been involved in campaigning for both rural and agricultural issues for quite some time. My co-chair, Naringa Tumenaite. Can you say a few words, Naringa?
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Neringa from United for Intercultural Action, which is a European anti-racism network. And I'm happy to see everyone here, and our role is to make this discussion very sort of friendly and non-formal. So I hope for an interesting presentations and Q&A.
Okay, thanks. With that, let's introduce the contents of the session. So I'll start by reading out the description of the session. Looting of nature and land grabbing from the local population threatens the cohesion of our societies and the future of the world. The transfer of rural wealth to a few large companies and banks in the big cities takes from those who work on the fields, in the forest, and on the sea, and gives to the already rich. Conflicts escalate as the state is used against resistance to the looting. By various means, companies and authorities try to silence opinion, which has increasingly happened with open violence in many countries. A system change is needed that can create power for the rural population over the resources that are material basis for their lives. What is needed is an equal social, cultural, and economic relationship with the urban population. Alternatives such as local forest management, agroecology, and food sovereignty can unite urban and rural residents in the protection of healthy food and biological diversity. How can environmental struggle in various issues in rural areas contribute to a system change that leads to a sustainable society? So I guess that pretty much frames the content of this session. We have a couple of panelists today. First of all, we have Uma Shankari from India, organic farmer and activist. Uma, thank you for joining in with late notice as well.
Thank you.
We have Vasna Ramasar from South Africa, Global Tapestry of Alternatives. Hello, Vasna.
Hi, everyone.
We have Georgi Dropa from Hungary, Danube Circle and Prague Spring 2.
Okay.
Nice to see you. And we have David Bennett from Sweden from B Akademin.
Mm-hmm.
Hello.
Hi, David. Nice to see you. So before we give the floor to our panelists to start with, maybe we could say a few words on the technicalities. So I'm looking a little bit to Naringa, if you could explain to the audience how to ask questions, etc.
Yes, so you can either write in the chat and we can give you the right to speak in case you would like to ask live, or you can ask by writing.
Right, you can ask your question by typing it in the chat as well.
Yeah,
so
or
we'll
if not, just say I, and then we give you the right to speak. And
yeah, I guess that will be we will go with the flow as things will turn out. But first of all, the outline of the talk is going to be, we will have the panelists talking 7 minutes each, and then we will have a discussion where we can take up questions that were posed in the chat or pose other questions to our panelists, and hopefully that will be a lively discussion. And finally, we will end it with a few last words from our panelists. So with that, I give the floor to Uma Shankari. first speaker. Uma, do you want to start?
Maybe I would like to come a little later. Maybe somebody else. I would like to, because I got this, got to know about this in the last minute. I'm basically replacing another panelist, Ulka Mahajan. She's not able to come. But anyway, I mean, I'm also here and I can say what I would like to say. But first, maybe I would like to hear others so that I can get a sense of what the session is about.
Okay, well, that's fair enough. Maybe we can ask Vasna to start. Would that be okay?
Yes, sure. And I also listened to Umaji speak in the session just before, so I can understand wanting a little breather and a chance to listen. So, hello everyone. I am Vasna from the Global Tapestry of Alternatives. I am originally from South Africa and have been involved with activism and struggles there and continue to do so, even though I have now been living for a few years in Sweden and Denmark, where I find that the struggles against environmental racism are even more important to bring up. So in terms of what I was going to say now, with the few minutes that I have, is I thought it would be useful to just sort of situate some of the big struggles that we have in terms of rural environmental issues, what I see as the sort of fundamental causes and drivers behind it, and then what we need to do moving forward around that, and touching a bit on what are the ambitions of the global tapestry of alternatives in that process. So yes, Ellie has already mentioned several of the struggles that we deal with, and if I just actually try and highlight them very quickly, it is first that we have issues around infrastructure, access to services. There is a huge divide between rural and urban, and we see both a lack of infrastructure and a lack of services, but also in some way there is an overdevelopment where we're seeing massive extractivism happening in rural sites around the world. If I look at South Africa itself, you know, in the name of development, we are extracting resources, we are extracting people, and we're extracting knowledge itself from rural areas without actually supporting people or the benefits coming to them. The second is land grabbing, and this is both in a national level, but also the global land grabbing that is happening between nation states, but also obviously through large corporations. Probably the issue that some of the others will talk about a little bit more, and I know Umaji will certainly raise, is agriculture and food sovereignty. And we know the problems that farmers are facing around the world, but I also just want to relate to the fact that we have a lot of myths about agriculture, about agricultural yields, about sort of this kind of agricultural treadmill with industrial agriculture that's happening that we do need to break. You know, less than 1 hectare accounts of farmers, right, for 72% of all farms. So farms that are smaller than 1 hectare account, you know, for 72% of all farms. Most farming is done by small scale agriculture, by subsistent agriculture. And yet we have this idea that it is the big industrial farms that are feeding the world. Absolutely untrue. We also have the idea that pesticides are the only way to go. Fertilizers, pesticides, GMOs is the way to feed the world. When in reality, we're seeing that using sort of traditional ways of farming can yield very good crops, very similar numbers, almost 90%, just based on good management. So we need to talk about that, about the myths that are being promulgated on this issue. The fourth issue I want to raise is the question of life worlds and identity, and how rural life worlds are at stake, are at threat. We saw that recently in the Global Assembly of Amazon, where they talked about ethnocide and terroricide. We have to recognize that. And then finally, the killing of earth defenders as a final problem and struggle that many of us are seeing in rural areas and facing. all of that to me is related to some fundamental drivers, and the opening session, which I'm sure most of you were at, highlighted these. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but I just wanted to reiterate a couple of points. Capitalism, patriarchy, and colonialism as the systems of hegemonic control, consumption and patterns of ecologically unequal exchange, the very idea of development itself and the need to develop the rural. And then also with that, finally, we have to also recognize that it's multiple crises that we are struggling against in rural areas. It's not just one. And those are going to be accelerating both the grabbing and the destruction of lands and rural lives. So in the few minutes that I have left, I just want to say a few things about how we are trying to address that. And some of those are around resistance, rejecting the development models that are being pushed on us that are about extractivism, that are about the agricultural treadmill, rejecting the patriarchal and colonial systems of capitalism so that we actually take back lands and the ways of living with the land. And all of that ties a lot to trying to make sure that we develop collective solidarity. We've seen incredible movements like Via Campesina, and it's a pity no one from there was able to join the session today. But there's certainly so much that has been done. I'm sure Umaji is going to talk about the farmers in India and the amazing action that is happening right now that the world is watching, and I think there's a lot of solidarity for. But beyond that, also, it's about actively celebrating the small scale and subsistence farmers and building the alternatives. And I think this is really important in the work that we're trying to do at the Global Tapestry of Alternatives. It's about a process of weaving and sharing, of strengthening all of us by learning and supporting each other. And so that's really where the Global Tapestry Alternative tries to work in building up the sort of alternatives, but also the resistance to the patriarchal system. I think as a final point, I just want to add that, and this is something that came up in the opening as well, we have to open ourselves to new ways of knowing and being, and to also topple this anthropocentric view. It came up earlier, and I hope we can continue to discuss it, because nature is most alive in rural areas. And so we need to think about the struggle, not just in terms of people, but also what it means for nature itself. Thank you very much, Eli.
Thank you very much, Vasna. That was a great presentation, very to the point, very concise, and you brought up very important issues as well. So thank you for that. Let's go to the next speaker, and we go to Hungary. And Georgi Dropa, are you ready to present?
Yes, of course. Thank you.
Okay.
Dear friends, I mean, it will be difficult to stay within 7 minutes. So if I'm too lengthy, then please stop me. I will speak about the economic, ecological, cultural, and social aspects of the Hungarian agriculture before the regime change and after, so meaning today. Agriculture was a great success sector in Hungary. And as an interpreter, I often accompanied foreign delegations who wanted to learn the secret of the Hungarian method, which was not very complicated, but its success was not debatable. Mm-hmm. In the village size of a collective farm, there was about 5,000 and 10,000 hectares as a production plant. There was only one collective farms in a smaller village. In bigger places, there were 2 or 3. I was an interpreter from Portuguese to Hungarian and back, so I'm not a native English speaker, as you can hear. The small factories, which were also working in the collective farms, were employing a lot of workers. And in those places, a lot of low-skilled people were also given jobs. After the change, a lot of forest fell into the hands of small owners, And many of them were making clear cuts because they wanted to get the money right away. As a bad example, I must mention that there were, for example, 15 sugar factories in Hungary. To serve them, sugar beet were grown all over a large area, and they employed a lot of people. Only one of these factories remained. The rest was brought up during the changes, during the privatization, and closed. Even the last remaining one is also not in Hungarian hands. The same thing happened in the canneries, the canning industry. There was a lot of needlework, handwork in the canneries, and they simply closed them. Retirees recovered 20 glacis of grain, pensionists, and they could receive it in corn or wheat, and they were feeding the poultry and the pigs, this accounted for more than half of the country's meat production. There was about 10 pigs in every backyard. Piglets were also requested, and in those times, in the village area, people were rich, and houses and complete streets were built during that time. Our agriculture was producing good quality. With the change of the regime, the lagging people of the countryside, they became acquainted to the hunger and the cold again, especially during January or February. Especially the elderly and the sick. Food consumption has fallen significantly. As a result of the sustaining power of rural life has been declined, several rural settlements became a holiday resort. Peoples are having more than one place to live. On large estates with large machines, the former irrigation canals were ploughed into many places, and the area of irrigated land declined. Then it was about 1/4 of the land, 25%, and today is in between 5 and 10%. The large companies also dominated the manufacturer industry. They are mainly Italian, French, American companies in the agriculture manufacturing industry. The state does not intervene into this process. Today we have come to a point where the rural man does not produce for himself also. They also go to Tesco or the Ocean Shop and make shopping there. I'm really sorry that I can almost only talk about negative things. In the past, organic manner of animal husbandry was recycled to improve the fertility of the agricultural land. This has been diminished in the proportion of the decline in animal production. Today, the main role here is played by chemicals. This is extremely damaging the ecosystem because of the remains of chemicals. Together with the rain, it gets to the living water. The existing government programs are absolutely not effective. The level of collective morality in the rural land was much higher. Today, state believes only in power and money, and the power of money. And I made also some tables comparing the amount of production in 1989 and in 2019, 30 years later. If I will have the word later, I can explain it and I can show the differences. And of course, I can also send my complete text to you, and then you can read and compare these figures. Thank you.
Okay.
Or do I have still some time?
You have 1 minute.
Okay, then I will use only this table. I think it's a very important agricultural figure, that how many hectares is under the agriculture in my country. I'm speaking in thousands. Earlier it was 6,200, and now it's 5,300. In cereals, all type of cereals together, it's about the same number, but in sugar beet, as I explained it, for 5,300, it dropped to 800. In potatoes, from 1,300, it dropped to 300. From vegetables, it is from 1,800 dropped to 1,400. In fruits, from 2,200 to 700. In dairy beef, from 1,500 to 900. In pork, from 7,600 to 2,600. In poultry, 58,000 to 39,000. And in eggs, from 8,700 to 3,600. This shows that that big number of the population is not able to eat as they did earlier. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It would be nice to maybe see the picture later on, if that is possible. Very recognizable picture that you draw also from other EU countries, I think. I mean, even in Sweden, we have seen, in a way, similar developments. Thank you very much, Georgi.
Thank you.
With that, let's go to the next speaker, and that is David Bennett. So, David, are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go. I will share my screen. Let's see. That one there, and we'll go back to the beginning. So, can everybody see? Or?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. So I'll be giving some perspectives of the rural environmental struggle from a Swedish perspective. Perhaps first a word about struggle. I'm not really comfortable with that word. I mean, as you perhaps can hear, I'm from Great Britain. I live in Sweden now. Compared to the real struggle that is actually happening, conducted by indigenous people and other peoples around the world, we've got it really easily. We've got really easy. But the title is struggle, so I'll work from that. I'm part of the Transition Towns movement in Sweden, as well as the Village Academy. And as such, I like to aim for positive visions of what we're working for. So the struggle, what's the struggle for? What are we struggling to achieve? And listening to Tyson Yunkaporta, who wrote the book, The Sand Talk, How Indigenous Thinking Can Save the World, he puts people as the carers for everything. That's our purpose here. We do need to stop the destruction, but also have a positive side to that of being the carers of everything, the caretakers of the world. And if we look to Rihanna Eisler, who has written a number of seminal works, including The Chalice and the Blade, The Real Wealth of Nations, and recently Nurturing Humanity, she goes into a partnership definition of what we're trying to achieve here. So to get past this domination idea of that I am more than you and we are more than nature, that we develop this idea of partnership. So that is also the purpose of the struggle. And if I was to combine those two, and a third thinker, which I've not included now of time reasons, I could perhaps say that it's finding our collective way forward to partnership with ourselves, each other, and the land. We can't go back to partnership. We can't go back to our indigenous roots, but we can hopefully learn from that to go forwards from where we are now to a better future. So what's actually happening in Sweden, and what is the struggle? This is a donut diagram, if you're familiar with the work of Kate Rayworth. That's where it comes from. Around the outside, we've got the planetary boundaries. They're all horribly red for Sweden. And in the middle, we've got the social foundation. So we can't go over the outside, and we need to keep up the inside. So we can see that employment we're having slight troubles with in Sweden, but it's at the cost of the world. We're eating the world. And you could say that what we've developed in Sweden, in some other cases, are called weird societies, Western, educated, industrial, rich, democratic, because we've developed an industrial consumption-based welfare society based on national and international exploitation. And Sweden is no exception here. If I was to pick out the donut for my country of origin, then I'm sure it would be approximately the same. So what are we aiming for then? If we're looking at regeneration, local regeneration, then what is the land that we're on here? And one idea about realizing what the land needs and working for the land, with the land, you have to go back, or you can go back to the idea of bioregions. And this is the major landscape type. And as you can see here, we've got a close-up of the 52 subrealms that was developed for the Bioregions 2020 framework. That's a very interesting site, the One Earth site. You can go and look at. We see Sweden. There's two parts there. Sweden is in the middle, with the border to Norway on the west and Finland to the east. It's mainly boreal forest in the northern part of Sweden. I'm in the northern part of Sweden, so I'm going to talk about forests because that's where you'll see why. So what do boreal forests do, or what should they be like? And here we've got an old growth forest, one of the few remaining in northern Sweden, and that's what it should look like. We've got a mixture of species there, both deciduous and coniferous trees. That's what the landscape is. That's how it developed after the ice retreated 10,000 years ago. From ground level, something like that. A variety of ages, a variety of species, old, crooked, gnarled, living, alive, above the ground, below the ground. And if we're going to talk about climate, which we can very well do, we can see that boreal forests actually pick up or collect and hold the largest amount of carbon, in tons per acre, apart from the wetlands. So we can see that they're fantastically important to keep and increase the amount of ground-based carbon. Oh, I've got 1 minute left. Oops. So they're really important. What are we doing with them in Sweden? We're doing this with them. We're cutting them down every 60 years. And you see the trees that are left, there's one species of the same age. It's not a forest, it's a plantation. That's like the wheat fields that you would see with the combine harvesters just plowing down. It's a desert. Biologically, ecologically, it's a desert. And we're making innovative forestry products here. We're basically, we realize that oil is a limited resource, and we're seeing what we can get out of the forest instead. So there's plastics and biodiesel and clothes, but mostly packaging. So they cut down the forest and they send it to us as packaging and toilet products. So that's one of the major environmental struggles. The other is food-based. And there again, we've got the industrial domination of the land to produce ingredients to the national and international food industry. We're not producing, the farmers don't produce food so much, they produce ingredients to the food industry. Apologies that I'm going so quickly, but my timer says I've got 3 seconds left. So why don't we just stop? Well, partly farmers are in debt to the banks. So there's the debt pattern that we need to stop. It's just a habit. This is the way we've already done it. And we need to keep going because that's how we get our food at the moment. So that's the paradox of it. We're stuck at the moment. So we need to build something new. And how can we find our way forward to partnership? And there's a list of some of the things there which we found in the Village Academy that we're looking at, asking again, what is a village? Do we understand that in this hyper individualized society that we've created for ourselves? Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Very interesting perspective with I can see in my imagination like pockets of resistance with the small villages trying to work together to create better life for everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So let's go to the last speaker who I addressed first. Uma, do you want to join?
Yes, now heard some very interesting thoughts. All this while one used to think that somehow socialist countries failed. And here, very interesting to hear that Hungary, in its pre-liberalization, privatization, globalization days, was actually a very functional kind of a society. I also was very interested to hear how the boreal forests are actually so good for us, and we need to work to preserve them. Well, you've all heard of this great farmers agitation going on in India. It is, I mean, if I have to describe it in one very quickly, tens of thousands of farmers are sitting outside Delhi, blocking all the roads to Delhi, which is the capital of India, and asking for a simple minimum protection from the state, whereas the state, right from the days of signing WTO, the World Trade Organization agreement, has been pushing us into a corporate way of agriculture, and also in every other sector, under the name of liberalization, privatization, and globalization, in the name of free open markets, in the name of a so-called comparative advantage. So all these are constantly telling us that they are all more efficient ways of production. But then in that process, whole millions of people are being displaced from their livelihoods. Even I mean, it's uh, so small, as Vasna was saying, how most of the world people are doing agriculture in less than 2 or 3 hectares, or less than 5 acres. The same is true of India. 80% of people, that is 140 million farmers, out of which 125 million of farmers, they are having less than 2 acres of farm, or and they are able to somehow produce a big surplus for the whole country, and also leave some for exports. So this amazing, like ants, like bees, they're doing their work. They're producing food and produce for themselves and for a nation. So in since the WTO agreement, what has been happening is that subsidies in agriculture sector as well as in other sectors have been withdrawn. So the cost of cultivation as well as cost of living has gone up like anything. At the same time, the agriculture prices are hitched to global prices, and it has seen a lot of volatility and uncertainty of incomes. So farmers' incomes have been steadily falling and they form the biggest population in our unorganized sector. So they have no safety nets. The government is trying to build some safety nets, but it is far from adequate. And instead of being self-managed, self-employed people with self-sufficient livelihoods. They are sort of made to push themselves towards the cities for employment. And in the recent pandemic, saw uh, hundreds of thousands of migrant workers returning to their lands. And the entire farmers' agitation has got built up from this anger of 20 years or so. You see, there are lots of ecological problems. And sometimes one wonders why Indian farmers are not doing so-called environmental struggles. They're all the time fighting for economic benefits. The point is that they are in such a subsistence survival level that if in the area where you've been farming, if a farmer does not get up in the morning, clean the cow shed and milk the cows and take it to the place where it has to be sold, and then take the cows to graze, feed the cows and have his own food and then go rush to the farm. If he didn't do all that, he wouldn't even get a minimum subsistence kind of income, and that too will come after many months of production in agriculture. So this is the kind of situation most farmers are living in. So naturally they don't even have the energy or the time to organize themselves into a huge struggles and protests and all that, and they need people like us who are educated, and then the level of literacy is so low. The level of exposure to the world is so limited that they need people like us, to articulate their problems. They are our problems also. So this is so in the philosophical side, I would say that socialism or capitalism, it doesn't matter. This liberalization, privatization, globalization is common to now, whether it is a socialist country or a capitalist country. So we need to get out of that paradigm. We also need to, this economic theory about primary sector somehow being lower than the industrial sector and the tertiary sector, the manufacturing and industrial sector. This hierarchy of sectors, we need to get out of that thinking, and we need to restore primacy of primary production. We need to give dignity and material benefits. We need to share material benefits as well as a sense of dignity with primary producers, like people in the working with forests, people in agriculture, people with mines, working in mines, and people with primary products, the crafts, the pastoralists, tribal people, and all that. So restoring the primacy of primary production and getting out of this liberalization, privatization, globalization model of world development, where inequalities have only increased. What nonsense! And welfare state, which cared a little bit for their poor, that is coming under so much attack everywhere. Even in the developed countries where welfare state was in some good shape, there also the state is withdrawing.
Just a short time.
Yeah.
Half a minute most.
Okay, thank you. Yes, even that is under attack. So how do we get out of it is what we have to think. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you for joining us, Uma. Thank you very much. And also thanks for the system perspective and both tying the local struggle to the global perspective and the global economic trends. So very useful. Okay, with that, we opened the chat for people to introduce themselves. So I would like to encourage everyone who's joining to actually take the opportunity to present yourself.
We have two questions already from Ajay and Laurie. So I don't know if you would like me to read them or if perhaps you would like to ask them live. No, you can unmute yourselves if you want.
If people feel comfortable, it would also be lovely if they put their videos on.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
How do we decolonize? So all of these things are happening because our laws are not respected, the customary laws. So they come in and they take everything that we have ecologically developed and take it to the cities. They say, for example, nuclear energy is clean energy because they dump all the radioactive on the rural peoples, indigenous peoples. So how do we get those who come to our communities and start developing it to be held accountable by our customary law system, where they have to come and answer to people who have been upholding the rule of law for many generations before the states?
Thank you. Who would like to take this question? Okay, Vasna.
Hi, Neringa. Thanks for the opportunity. My name is Ajay. I work with an organization called Public Advocacy Initiative for Rights and Values in India, and we work on the intersections of development, rights, and sustainability. My question was addressed to David, and thanks to David for his excellent presentation. My question comes from the concern that we are tired of seeing environmental education being focused only on the individual responsibility and individual behavior, even in countries like ours. I mean, we understand there is a greater concern for individual responsibility and improved individual responsibility in industrialized countries. But how do you say people to improve their behavior in countries like Mozambique, Maldives, or Chad, or even Bangladesh? What I missed in David's presentation was that I could not see any role for politics in improving the situation. And a lot of us actually believe that climate crisis and crisis of sustainability is a political problem rather than an environmental one. So how does he address that? Thank you so much for giving the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you. So,
thank you. Should we go back to the decolonizing question first?
Yes, so we had, so we'll close this round, and then in the second round, we'll have Matthias, who has also raised his hand. So Vasna was going to respond about the colonization question.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say a few words on that now because I'm sure others have inputs as well. But Laurie, I think, I mean, that's a really, really important point. And maybe if I can just give two examples in Southern Africa, the first peoples are the San people, and they have experienced exactly that kind of extractivism taking place. So even, for example, their knowledge about certain types of plants like the hoodia has been taken from them and then patented by companies. And so what they've done is push back against that and have set up an institute that all research, all projects have to come through. They've set up a research ethics guidelines that have to be approved and a panel that has to go through, so that they are actually then taking back some of the control and power in how these interactions happen. So that's at one level. And at another level, I think it's really, really important that we also look at sovereignty. If you look at what's happening with the Wet'suwet'en Nation right now in Canada, you know, it's land that has not been ceded to the Canadian government, yet is being taken over right right now for extractivism again. And so, you know, we also, as all of us, need to hold our governments accountable. We also have to ask these questions about what is happening in terms of indigenous lands. If I look at Sweden, what's happening in Sapmi with the Sami people, we have very similar issues. So there's a pushback from communities, but also I think at an educational level, because we're heading in that direction with the next question, we need to learn different things. We need to learn about different people's knowledge as being important. And we also need to really address decolonization.
Thank you, Vasna. Would any of the panelists like to add on this quite comprehensive answer? Do we feel we're covered? Okay, shall we then touch upon what Ajay raised regarding individual responsibility and education? So maybe, David, you would like to.
Yeah, thanks for the question. And I think, so AJ took up the points of that it seemed that I was just talking about individual responsibility and where's the role of government and policy in this. And I think it does actually reflect back on the colonization question. Because, well, partly I didn't say that we're all individuals and we need to find our individual answers, and recycling is the key. Instead, I was talking about community. And what we need to find is how we as local communities, we need to find our own local communities, we need to redefine them. And speaking perhaps as one of the colonizers, in finding our community, then we can also take responsibility for our own food, because we can't even do that at the moment. We're taking everything from everywhere else just to feed ourselves. It's appalling, really. So this community-based agriculture, I mean, there's the community-supported agriculture, for example, is one thing. Another phenomenon which is growing in Sweden largely, also Finland, has been around in Finland for a while, is the RECO model, where local producers sell directly to local consumers. And that's local people taking responsibility for themselves together. Because what I can do as an individual is very little. But if we were to get together, then the ideas and the inspiration that I get from you redoubles my own ideas and my own experience, and hopefully I bring something back to you as well. We had a third person in, and now we're talking exponential growth in a good way of what we're able to achieve. So it's local communities taking back the power which they perhaps have been denied by our governments. Speaking of governments, what's the role of politics in this? Well, we hope that governments would be allies, but what we've seen so far in the over 40 years since we've known about these problems is everything going the wrong way. So, I mean, yeah, we hope that the government's going to step up, but when are they actually going to do it? They say it's your responsibility, you're not voting the right way. Well, you know, even if enough people did vote the right way, do they have the imagination? Do they have the power? If I was to write, or we were to write a manifesto tomorrow that said, right, we need to do this, this is the way we need to go, who has the power to implement that? Who has the will to implement that? There are individuals that want this, but they don't have the power to do it. And the people that perhaps do have the power, well, I mean, it's distributed, but they've got their power by the system being as it is. And it's largely unlikely that they're willingly going to give that up. I don't mean that we need to take it from them. I mean we need to turn our back on them and create something new everywhere. And what's new and relevant in where I live is different from what's new and relevant where, say, Vasna lives. So we all need to find our own solutions.
Thank
together.
you. That's beautiful answer. Would anyone else from the panelists or participants like?
Yeah, I would like to just endorse what Bennett said. Power is a drug. It is always taken. It is never given. So at any level, the state or, any state is not going to give its power. As you said, communities have to come together to claim the power through struggles and in India, I mean, there is this concept of Swaraj, which was supposed to be a community in some kind of a self-sufficient way, should try to satisfy most of its needs by itself. And, ideas like that have to be revived and fought for. I mean, I don't think anybody is going to give us anything. Yeah.
Thank you, Uma. I think Ajay agrees with the comment.
I'm sure.
Maybe I add also that in the European Union countries, the farmers are receiving a subsidy from the European Union. And this is based on the area of the land.
Okay.
Now imagine a farmer with 5 hectares in a competition with another farmer with 10,000 hectares, or there are some of 5,000 or 100,000 hectares. How can you compare the amount of money which can change the way of farming? And on top of that, even the Hungarian government is giving some subsidies, but only to the loyal farmers. And the way they're receiving it, they practically receive a help in how to be even richer by owning the land of somebody else. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more thoughts on this topic, or we move to Matthias, who has been raising his hand patiently?
Yes, thank you very much. I greet you all. It was really wonderful presentations I heard. What came into my mind is the cooperatives. We had, this cooperative system before the system changed. Yuri Dropa has talked about it. I think this gives a good example how the possibility for joining forces, joining production facilities together. And George didn't mention that we had also consumer cooperatives. That means not only the production, I mean the product of the agricultural products, was organized on cooperative basis, but also the distribution and the marketing. I think this is very important point. I don't know what is the situation in other countries, but I think in the future, we have to touch the ownership, the question of ownership, and ownership towards a higher humanistic society is, just through community-based production, and community must get together. They have to share their production facilities and their forces. So I think it would be a future way to reorganize or to start, to touch the property, I mean the ownership question, and to organize, the people, the agricultural production on, on cooperative basis. I know that it needs a legal adjustment. I don't know what is the situation in India, but what I have seen, the pictures of the people protesting, I don't know what is the frame where they can join their forces. What are the organizational background of this beautiful resistance against privatization and all kind of stuff like that? These are questions and in a way proposal from my side to go into the direction of cooperatives. The private ownership is not the future. I mean, the future is community-based production, community-based living, community-based culture, everything. It's, you know, if we go on the individual direction, I think we are losing. We are lost. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthias. Perhaps someone would like to react and agree or oppose. Has been...
Yep.
Yes.
I can. I think I got the same sort of feeling as Vasna did. That Matthias was sort of touching on well, land rights and the commons largely, which Vasna pointed out in the chat, is being destroyed by international financial institutions, perhaps other institutions as well. And if you look at Sweden, for example, there's now proposals to allow companies to buy agricultural land, which has previously been forbidden. And we can see that as soon as you open up lands to be bought by corporations, then there's just a massive land grab where the capital owners, the already rich, are going to win that race. And you can see what happens once people with capital buy something, they want the return on investment, and then it's extractive agriculture. So what we need to come back to, I think, is the commons, and exploring again, you know, what does the commons mean, and how can we collectively manage the commons to increase biodiversity, both social and ecological, and create good livings for the people who are there in the locality.
For those who have just joined, feel free to jump in, and you can ask questions in the chat or your suggestions or live by unmuting yourself. So yes, and I think I saw Vasna. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of add to the conversation because, of course, I mean, I'm agreeing with Matthias and David, but I can also say that in some of the groups that we work with, for example, the communities of the Potato Park in Peru, they are doing amazing collective work, but also extending that to try to teach other communities how to organize, how to share, how to work cooperatively. That's really important. In India, sort of groups like Makam have worked with women farmers, especially during the pandemic lockdown, to try and make sure that they could secure seeds collectively and find markets as well. So there are examples of collective organizing that are successful on a small scale. And I wanted to just put in some of the positive examples as well.
Thank you. Are there any more questions or thoughts on this discussion? If not right now, I wanted to give a question to everyone. What role do you think World Social Forum could play in this? Well, we see that it's bringing us together, it's mobilizing. Is that enough? Is there anything missing? If anyone has any thoughts that we could propose going forward.
Can I say something? I mean, it's a thought which, you know, just came to me. That World Social Forum is, of course, you know, is bringing like-minded people. I mean, just now, you know, have a dozen of us or just 20 of us perhaps, have shared such similar thoughts. And yet, you know, somehow, I mean, and World Social Forum after World Social Forum afterwards, we have shared similar thoughts now, I mean, in the last 20 years. And yet, you know, the world is going in one direction, which is opposite of what we had even initially started with. So I'm just wondering myself how we are not able to, you know, change the world. Then I'm thinking, did we fail in building a critical mass? Sometimes the changes happen very quickly if you build a critical mass. And the forums like World Social Forum can help in building that kind of critical mass, which, and we have to work on it. How we have to build this. The World Economic Forum, consisting of the world billionaires and the corporate houses, they seem to work in a good synchrony to build a world which is suitable to them. Why are we not able to do that? We have to, I think, seriously think and how we can sort of work on a critical mass to sort of quicken this process. I'm just, look, actually, I'm just thinking aloud. I'm sure these are highly tentative thoughts, but just wanted to express them.
Thank you. That was brilliant, actually. We have a comment from Laurie. Would you like to jump in just by unmuting yourself, or would you like me to read? Okay. Yeah, well, let me see if she wants to unmute. No, okay, so then I'll just read. Could World Social Forum connect ecologically based communities without capital with technology resources, such as at universities to facilitate more research, documentation of the issues, to support local initiatives, such as customary governments? Our governments are discarded because of systematic racism, not because we have bad governance. Would anyone like to react to Laurie's question? Yeah?
Yeah, I would say that I fully support what Uma was saying. The critical mass, yes, that is the point. If they see that we are the people that they must negotiate with, then we could make the next step. But what's happening now is a sad story which must be completely changed. For example, the victims of the regime change were in my countries the biggest victims, the gypsies. Previously, 85% of them worked, and this number dropped for 23% for nowadays. And if you look for the same figure for the Roma woman, this figure is 13%. The other item which I want to recall that before this agricultural production needed an education, and that was received within the family, and later that was received within the collective farm. But now the collective farm is owned by a person or maybe a bank, a company, nobody knows who is it, and the education within this field is not important anymore for them. They want a big production and a big profit. And as a result, what happened, that the significant part of the rural population have lost their knowledge, related knowledge to the agricultural production. So practically another generation have to grow up in order to receive this knowledge again, but we have to start this process as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you for this input. Would any of the other panelists like to contribute, or one of the participants? Often participants are as much experts as the panelists, by the way, so don't be afraid.
Yes. Sure.
We have a follow-up question, but whose law says that corporations own land? I guess that's for Georgi, no?
Is that perhaps a more philosophical question?
If anybody would like to reflect on how capitalism and corporate governance work.
In my country, it is the clearest example what is possible to have, because we had experienced both systems. We had a system before the World War, and that was as terrible as it's possible. It was, my country have a population of 10 million, and it was called the country of the 3 million beggars. Then it was very mixed, but after 1956, they tried to start with these collective farms, and it took about 10 years that they stood up and they really made a profit, and they were able to feed the country, and we have a lot of export production also. And now with the change, people hope that it will be even better, but the opposite happened. So by this example, I mean, everybody can compare that what is the value of collective working, of corporations, and even within the villages, they made industrial firms which were helping the agriculture, the agricultural production, the packaging, or anything else in a simple way. And they also were doing some type of organic farming, meaning that when it was possible to bring the product within the range of 30 kilometers, then we're not trying to build it to the other side of the world. I mean, for example, an example for South Africa, when I go to the supermarket and I see grapes from South Africa, I really feel myself horrified. I mean, this is not the type of product that I should eat, because imagine the pollution of air when they are bringing it from South Africa all over to Europe. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for this input. And actually, Lithuania has a similar situation. The biggest private landowner of forest is IKEA from Sweden. So, Ellie, you.
Yeah, thanks for bringing IKEA up to this debate. Well, no, don't get me started. I actually wanted to continue a little bit with Georgi's point about the bargaining power with the people, and I'm thinking a little bit that especially rural people, rural movements are being neglected most of the times by the people in the center, where the decisions are made, where the governments are situated. Maybe we could talk a little bit about changing that perspective, because the key in the transition is actually on the countryside. We mentioned that before as well. So how can we overcome that negligence of the people in power?
Well, in India, since the last few years, the state government itself is also trying to promote what is called farmers producer organizations. Small farmers, not too many, very small number, let us say 100 farmers or even less, coming together for both production and marketing purposes, forming into a kind of company. This is being promoted as a concept, and several farmers have come together and this is one way in which the bargaining strength of farmers in the rural areas can, especially in India, because they are such small farmers and everything has to be duplicated, you know, from tools to livestock to everything has to be duplicated at every farmer level. So it will be a good thing to bring these farmers together into small producer companies. But then, you know, it also means a lot of hand-holding for several years before they can start doing things on their own, because the modern systems, legal systems, procedural systems, administrative systems, they're all modern state, you know, and they even familiarity with them and working with them is quite difficult. So again, a lot of hand holding becomes quite necessary. There, Madam Birgitta has put up her hand, and we should hear her.
Well, I don't know really what to say, but I just want to comment maybe what Vasna said from the beginning. I find very wise. We have to build alternatives, and we have to build community. And that's what we have to do locally, of course. But we also have to build resistance. So I think those two things are the key to getting somewhere. And then I also was part of the last webinar where Uma also took part. And she said a couple of very wise things. We have to ask ourselves, what is a good life? That is the central question. And that we people, we are the only ones who can envision and create our own world. I find that a very helpful way of thinking. Yes, and generally we have to work from the conditions that we live under, and those conditions will vary very much over the world. What kind of possibilities the land where we live will give, and what politics maybe also will give or not give. So the question is to work from the local perspective, and of course build networks locally, nationally, regionally, and over the world, as I hope we are doing just now. This is just a comment, really.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Vasna, you were planning to speak before. Do you still have something to? And then Georgi.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, Gita, thank you very much, because I think you articulated probably the message we need to send from this session to the next session. That's the important thing. I wanted to just, though, come back to one of the points I made at the beginning, is that there is a way that people think about the future being urban that dismisses the rural, or talks about the rural as somehow stuck in time, maybe even backwards. And that's not true. And why this is pushed, it also takes away the agency of people who are rural. I was involved in a session last Friday with the African ecofeminists movement. And one of the things that they said is, we have a beautiful life here in our small rural communities. We don't need anything. We have people around us. We can feed ourselves. So actually, the best thing you can do for us is leave us alone. And I think this is really important, that one, we have to change these ideas about what rural is. It's a funny thing, because in many urban places, people think that the way of having relaxation and bliss is to go to the countryside, right? There is something in that idea, maybe a false idea of the countryside that people hold on to. But I think that's also a connection with nature there that's really important. But we need to shift this idea of what it is to develop, what it is to be, what it is to have that good life. And we have to acknowledge the agency of rural people, not have the decisions always made in the urban centers about what happens elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Vasna. These are very important points. Would anyone like to build on this? Yes,
Yorgi.
Yorgi, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to call your attention to another evil example, because the desire for these newly rich people, the possession of land for this political newly rich is so great that we had a farm, the so-called Kishhasnoshi. Kishhasnoshi is a village, organic farm, which had been operating successfully for more than 15 years. And they were also teaching organic farmers. And this was helped by a Danish foundation. And also they received support from the Norwegian funds, which is a fund which is held by the so-called, earlier they were called the EFTA countries, so Norway, Iceland, Liechtenstein, and I can't even remember this moment who is the fourth, so 4 countries, and they help this organic farming, which is something very progressive. So instead of liking this, they handed over this farm to a contractor, which was a friend to the government. Although even the children of our prime minister were educated in this farm, so even that was not helping them to see the value. And immediately that they received the land, they plowed the crops immediately and sprayed the land with fertilizers. That imagine that for almost 20 years that land was not receiving chemical fertilizers. Immediately they spoiled it. And formerly there were farmers which have been going to the court. This is happening already for more than 10 years. And the court made several decisions, but the land was not given back to the previous owners. The court is still at the case, still is not making a final decision, although this collective farm is helped by Greenpeace, for example, which has a great knowledge in disseminating information, and they were able to bring this case to the press, but it stays as it is right now. So we are really hoping that next year there will be election in Hungary and we will be able to change the whole system.
Thank you. David?
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to connect something that Vasna said with something that Uma said, and Vasna was talking about the urban norm, that the countryside is somehow like some backwards and the problem and something to be exploited, and without exploitation there's no value there. Of course we need to change that story, and I think that's and Uma was talking about what's the purpose of the World Social Forum now and going forwards. And I think it's stories. We're telling stories to each other, just sort of reaffirming our own beliefs of the value of what we're doing, and perhaps making new contacts. And sort of reaching out to new people. Perhaps we're trying new ideas or new ways of expressing old ideas. We're exploring the stories that challenge the norms which are destructive, and we're building sort of the global movement, which is so important, which we can take back to our national, regional, local movements. you know, the different contexts that we're in, and it's just sort of this cross-pollination of ideas and inspiration, really. I mean, me just sort of sitting here and hearing Birgitte talk about Vasna as being wise, and Vasna is nodding at things that I'm saying. You know, I'm being reinforced in, you know, sort of, you know, well, I might be onto something here. I'm not totally crazy, because everybody else out there is saying exactly the opposite to what we're saying here. So I mean, we need this kind of reinforcement from each other and from new people, just to prove that we're not crazy. And, you know, just to give us enough energy to go out and fight the good fight. And I don't like fight metaphors, actually, but I'm going to use it just now anyway. Yeah, so we really need this. And you might think that 19 participants here is you know, some people might call it a failure, but absolutely not. It's, you know, this is the right people are here, and the right things are happening. So, you know, I'm very pleased to be a part of it this time.
Thank you, David, for your positive thoughts on community reinforcement. We'll read out the last question before we head towards And so Rainesh asks, there are some successful examples of cooperative agriculture in India, like Kudumbashri, a project in Kerala, which is supported by the state governments. This project gave more power to small and marginal farmers and provided that cooperative farming can be a tool to improvement. So the question is, how can we push that idea in current scenario? Who would like to take on this question of the Kerala being famous for good practices? Yes,
yes. Yes, Ajay, I'm sure you have something to say.
Yes, Kudambashri is one of the examples that we have in India. But besides, there are several examples of people doing community farming in northeastern states and in other states also. But actually, the question is that political economy of fossil fuel and extractivism does not allow them to grow so big that they can become a movement even within the state or even within the country. Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else has additional thoughts? Vasna, you were okay. Vasna and David. Yeah.
I'm just going to use the opportunity to sort of put forward the process that I'm part of with the Global Tapestry of Alternatives, just because one of the things that we see as really, really important is that maybe it's not about everything becoming bigger or becoming the same, but it's about strengthening ourselves through that sharing. So the Global Tapestry of Alternatives is about trying to create these platforms where we share across different things. And in India, there's Vikalp Sangam. In Mexico, Colombia, there's Crianza Mutua. These networks who are bringing together smaller farmers. And so right now, with some of the work we're doing, it's about creating these opportunities for people to meet and talk, but also creating some platforms that learning can really go out to a bigger group. So I think that we need to stay local, but also find ways to connect globally.
Thank you. And David?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think you can interpret current scenario in different ways. And cooperative farms, absolutely. I mean, and we heard from Georgie how cooperatives were part of the landscape, perhaps in the past. And I think that, you know, coming back to that is very much part of developing and exploring what community is these days. I think an interesting development would be not to have state support. Does it work then? if state support is withdrawn, what happens to the enterprise? Can it actually stand on its own 2 feet? Can we create enterprises which work, which are regenerative, which bring income to the local people, to provide food, do what the businesses are supposed to be doing, without support of tax incomes? I think then we are actually talking about real sovereignty.
What Ajay Jha has been trying to point towards, that the ecosystem of the political ecosystem. You see, this is the problem. What David was also trying to say, that at least in the initial years, till it gets established, the cooperatives or farmer producer organizations, all these need a lot of hand-holding, external support, both by way of finances as well as by way of skills to negotiate with slightly bigger markets than very strictly local markets, and so on. So, all the time there is a need for both local and, the political levels. It's true.
Thank you. We have one question about connecting on the WSF. Laurie, are you able to explain? Okay.
Just that it would be good if we could go there throughout the year and get the connection details of all of these organizations. I mean, grassroots organizations don't necessarily have continuous internet, electricity, or even the ability to hold our devices. So, even lose the computers, the phones, everything that has all of these details. So if there's one place that people can go back to and get this connection, that would be good.
Thank you. We will note it in the recommendations as well. Thank you all, the panelists and the participants, for the brilliant discussion. I would now like to give you final thought round to our panel, just very shortly, for your positive outlook for the future on this topic. And then we will have a wrap up by Ali and some technical information. Okay.
Actually, before that, there are only 5 people who have not spoken. Please ask them to speak. I'm sure they have some wonderful thoughts going on in them. Pablo, Lebello, Maja, Yvonne, please. I'm curious.
Sometimes there's a technical.
Okay.
If any of the people who haven't spoken would like to jump into the round of last thoughts, you're also welcome, by the way. Okay, so who would like to begin, as we're also running short on time?
Yeah.
Okay, Georgi. Yeah.
Maybe I think that from the panelists and also for anybody who was participating in this meeting, nobody was against collective farming. I think we had overall support of this idea. And I think what I tried to do that I was trying to make a comparison and show an example how this was the most lucrative type of our whole system. Nothing was as good as our agriculture. And now, although the possibilities of our land is better than in most of the countries, we have no earthquakes, we have no tornadoes, we have lots of water in the country, and we have fertile lands, and still the agriculture is not making a nice profit, and even in such a country with such a good location, people are starving. So this is must be changed, and we must go back to collective farming in the field of agriculture and collective working also in the villages, because this is the way how the post office will stay in that village. This is the way that the school will stay, and this is the way that they will create a common culture. Thank you.
Thank you. Matthias agrees. Who would like to continue with like 1 minute short?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that it was a good intervention of Yuri. I can only repeat it, but what I thought is very important, that really we have to keep informed each other and we stay together. So it would be necessary to have a mailing list where we can exchange our ideas, we can keep contact and try to build up something common. In those positive examples we have all over the world, we have to share, we have to make it public. We have to tell to our people in our country and the same in your countries. So it makes the people, you know, some kind of joy and gives them, you know, strength to go forward and feel that we are together and not alone.
There's also a suggestion to have a family picture. So whoever are fine to have their picture taken, you can turn your camera on and then I can just take one while everyone is here. Okay, see, rural struggle. Okay, thank you. And we can continue with if
and
there are any more.
Another world is possible.
Yes.
I think also the suggestion to have email addresses, that people can write their email in the chat if they want to be a part of that.
Yes, I've already written.
Okay.
But I think you have all the pictures, all the email addresses of us.
And request rest of the participants to open their videos if that is possible.
Yeah, so we have several photo shoots, like professional models.
Respect the privacy. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else would like to share very quickly final thoughts before we go to Ellie for wrap up? No. Okay. Ellie, the floor is yours.
I've said everything. That's fine. Yeah.
Okay. To wrap up this discussion is maybe not an easy task. But what I have like 5 pages of notes, so let's see how far I get. I think we heard about a lot of inspirational struggles and collective organizing. I think that was one of the key points, and having a local base in the organizing. So the situation where you are is really important, and that can give inspiration to other organizations and other people struggling. But your struggle is depending on your local circumstances. We also heard about the disruptive mechanisms. We heard about extractivism, land grabbing, industrial agriculture, which is also good to be aware of, and also good to think of resistance to those destructive mechanisms. We also heard some ties to maybe not only the agricultural issues, but from Georgi, for instance, we heard about connections to jobs, to service in the countryside. We talked a little bit about the local culture, and I think all those aspects came together quite nicely in the seminar. Yeah, we heard also some words on the decision-making power, and how to think of that well, the decisions are for big politics are mostly made in the center, but we have to find our own way. How do you do that? How do you deal with the decisions made versus finding your own good life and your own community? Also, we talked about, related to culture, that rural people are sometimes perceived as backwards. How to change that norm? How to reach out to society as a whole, changing that power perspective. So all in all, I think we can take those aspects with us to the seminar that comes after this, and that Neringa is going to tell us a little bit more about. I think from a WSF perspective, networking is a real key. So how to give inspiration, how to strengthen each other, and looking for system change. How can we change the system, the disruptive system, together?
Thank you. That was a brilliant summary, Ellie. And to all the panelists, I will just share some semi-technical information. We have an assembly for the Ecology space at 5 UTC, so 22 minutes. And I have shared the link to the session here. And tomorrow there are 2 sessions combining several movements. So it's peace, social, and environmental movements. And you can find the full program here. And the program has all Zoom links that you need, and translations are to be provided. Yes, and I have shared the document for the contact details that you have all posted. And I can share again. So in case you want, you can copy that and reach out when you have something to share and want to promote. Thank you all again. So like the clap for the participants, and then we meet online or offline, hopefully one day soon.